The Deep Mystery of the Dogman by G. Mendelssohn. Edited and read by your old pal Bigfoot. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I've been listening to your program for years, and although you are obviously not the most popular channel of your type, I do enjoy your approach and delivery. Attached is a project which I am hoping you would like to read as an audiobook on your program. This started as a writing assignment for a class back in high school, but I kept working on it after school, hoping to build it into a book-length manuscript, but never managing to get anywhere near that goal. I still think it's got good information in it that you won't find anywhere else, so I rewrote it as a sort of an article with a number of different creepy stories in it that witnesses told me off the record were true. So this is a Dogman-centric collection, but it's on the weird and supernatural side of things. And the one thing I think ties these all together is that little bit of mystery. What exactly is a Dogman at the end of the day? Or is that not the correct question to ask? For instance, how do we know that all the allegedly true experiences I'm about to share are about the Dogman, as in the upright walking canid type of Dogman? How many might be Native American shape-shifting shamans or skinwalkers, or French-Canadian Lougarou, or Cajun Rougarou? There are a lot of different stories that have been going around in Europe, Canada, and the United States from a number of different cultures, all telling contradictory tales about what these upright walking creatures with dog or wolf-like heads truly are. On top of this, in more recent years, there has been a lot of chatter about the possibility that these could be creatures working for the government, perhaps specially bred to be used for security or warfare. Within these urban legends, you find sub-legends. Sub-legend A, the werewolves are actually being developed and bred by private companies. Sub-legend B, the werewolves don't actually exist but are holographic projections. Within sub-legend B, there are further subdivisions of people, some who think the creatures are implanted in people's minds through a combination of spectacle, suggestion, and psychoactive agents being introduced into the area via misting or crop dusting to make the human subjects more suggestible. Still others insist that the creatures are real and kept underground in military bases, only being released on the surface to serve as distractions to even bigger secrets that they, quote-unquote, don't want the public learning about. So there's lore within lore within lore, and branches of it stretching in directions so far distant from the others that very few can even agree on what the subject itself is that we're currently discussing. For me personally, I admit that the only thing I know for sure about the Dogman is that I am very confused about it. I have no idea what it really is, and I personally have still not encountered one. I have, however, spoken to some people who have, and I'm going to relate to you what each of them told me happened to them. I ask you to please accept what I tell you when I say that each of these people seemed sincere when relating their story, and they all seemed quite frightened at the notion of me identifying them by name in this article. The names I'll be using are all pseudonyms agreed upon by me and the witnesses themselves. When you hear how strange these stories can get, I think you'll understand why nobody wanted their names attached to them. I will be trying to name the town or area each event is supposed to have taken place in. And since I'm from Pittsburgh, you shouldn't be surprised that most of the events are weird Pennsylvania stories. All of my interviews were done old school style, with me meeting the person and bringing my tape recorder with me, the same way I had done it in high school back in the late 1990s when I started this project. After the interview, I would then go home and painstakingly and slowly transcribe the witnesses' statements from the audio. And that is what I'll be presenting for your interest tonight in these first two stories excerpted from my project. Story number 1. Bill S. tells us about the Dogman wearing gloves. I was driving toward the Burger Hut on the Colonel Drake Highway, which is Route 36 in Pennsylvania, around about Asheville, and my mouth was watering. Off in the distance, I could just see a big delivery truck bringing goodies to my favorite fast food stop in all of PA. It was kind of a dark and spooky day, overcast, with fast-moving clouds. I think it had already started to rain, but you could tell it was going to get much worse. Every so often I could see lightning in the distance, and then some thunder a few seconds later. So I guess it was a spooky atmosphere that this happened in. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about ghosts and goblins. I was thinking about good American beef, and how much of it I planned on putting in my good American belly. But then I saw that strange man off to the side of the road, and he was flagging me down, asking me for help. I instantly pulled off to the side of the road, and consciously I was thinking I wanted to do this because I wanted to get a load of this guy's crazy getup. He was dressed as some kind of a wolf man, like he was going to a Halloween party or something. The head looked really good, too. It wasn't some mask he bought at the dime store. He looked like a sort of a gray and white dog, I guess you would say, except he stood like a man. He wasn't any kind of bodybuilder, just an ordinary-sized man, probably not even 6 feet tall, to be honest. Oh, and sometimes when people tell me that I saw a real Dogman, I have to break their heart by telling them that this guy did look like a Dogman, but he was wearing gloves. Like maybe plastic or rubber gloves or something. You could partially see through them. What a doctor might use to operate so he doesn't get his germs inside you, or what a thief might use to break into your home so that he doesn't leave fingerprints behind. I didn't think this guy was a surgeon, so I was suspecting that he might be some weird kind of criminal. He spoke to me in a muffled manner, which I at first thought was because he was wearing that mask. I thought he sounded like a Native American at the time, but I don't remember why. He sounded older, like over 50 at least, maybe by a lot. I didn't see the mouth move, which made me more certain it was a mask. He kept saying the same thing over and over as he leaned into my car window, and I kept asking him to repeat himself because his voice sounded muffled. When I finally understood him, he was asking if he was on the correct wavelength, and I asked him, what's that supposed to mean? But when he told me that he needed my help in the woods, my mind returned to thoughts of Burger Hut, and how delicious that burger was going to taste for the 1.7 seconds it'd be in my mouth before I swallowed it into my stomach. I once broke up with a girl because she didn't like Burger Hut burgers, and you would too, if you'd ever taste these. So you can imagine my surprise when I found myself out of the car and walking through the woods behind this weird guy in the suit. From behind, the costume looked a lot more real than it had from the front. The legs moved and bent in a different way from a normal person's legs. They really did look like dog legs, and I began to wonder if this guy was deformed, or if he had practiced for years walking on his toes, like some kind of forest ballerina. The dog suit also had a tail that somehow knew to switch at flies buzzing around the butt of the costume. And why would flies buzz around a costume bottom anyway? Were even they fooled by how realistic this thing looked? We reached an outcropping of rock on top of a hill, which had unexpectedly strong winds blowing up there, and there was a man huddled down on the rock, seeming to be weeping. The Wolfman costume guy squatted down, and I saw this weird optical illusion where it looked like he had 3 feet to squat on, not 2. It had to be an optical illusion, though. I must have been seeing his tail, and it just looked like a foot. The costumed man held up 2 fingers to me, and I thought he was flashing me the peace sign, so I flashed one back and grinned like an idiot. I could hear the other man sobbing now, though, and that wiped the smirk off my face. Why had I followed this weird guy to this weird place? What was going to happen to me now? That was the question I was asking myself. What was going to happen to me? As though I had no power or say or control in this situation. And I suppose I didn't. The man took off one of his gloves. When the glove was on, he had ordinary human hands. But when he took it off, what I saw emerge from the semi-translucent plastic or rubber or whatever it was glove was a hairy, clawed, canine paw, not a human hand whatsoever. My heart began to race, and for the first time, I got scared. This seemed like something happening to the other guy, until I saw that monster, claw, hand, paw, at the end of this guy's hairy arm, and I realized that I wasn't in Kansas anymore. I mean, I had seen human hands under those gloves, and these paws were not even close to the same shape. Not only that, but those long, sharp claws would have easily torn through those thin, flimsy gloves. He definitely had human hands. And then, he definitely didn't. I was sweating like it was 100 degrees, but it wasn't. And I was breathing really weird and hard. It was like every cell in my body was terrified and wanted to run out of there. But I just sat there obediently instead. The weird magic monster thing called out my friend Sam's name, and the crying man came over. The native voice told me this was my friend Sam, and I stared at him, not recognizing him at all. After a while, I got up and went over to the crying man, and then he did look like Sam. I thought Sam had passed away overseas years ago, but he looked quite healthy to me, if sad. He told me that he'd been to hell and back, and we gave each other a big bro hug. I wanted to ask him about the strange werewolf man, but he was no longer there when I looked back, and for some reason, it felt like a subject that neither of us wanted to talk about. I walked Sam back to my car and took him to Burger Hut, and then he moved in with me for a while. I got him a job, and we hung out a lot for a while. Then Sam stole my girlfriend, and I made him get his own place. Not sure what's up with him any longer, as I am married now, and I don't want Sam coming around to steal my wife. End of Bill S. story. Now, does that sound like he encountered an unknown cryptid? Nothing can ever be simple in Pennsylvania, man. That's the only constant about my home state. This next weird Pennsylvania Dogman story actually happened to a somewhat distant relative of mine, which makes keeping her anonymity a little more difficult. We didn't even know we were related until I was literally sitting in her living room talking to her. We have one living relative that we both know, and that's it. It's a relationship by marriage, not blood, but she's my cousin anyway, and we do keep in touch still after this, trading Dogman and cryptid stories we see online with each other. This is obviously a mutual interest of ours. We're going to call my cousin Barbara, for personal reasons, and let's jump into it. Story number 2. Cousin Barbara tells us about the old lady and the bear-like Dogman. We had a big Dogman that lived here in the woods for the first 3 years I owned this house. I used to leave offerings for him and the old lady who looked after him. He was very old when I knew him. Those were the last 3 years of his life. People ask me if he was a scary Dogman or a nice Dogman, but they don't understand. This was not just a big pooch. This was some kind of a man. Just a man in a big, hairy animal body. He was a magic man, like a wizard or sorcerer. I don't know. Maybe he was even a shapeshifter, although I don't think so. He seemed sad on the day when I met him. Sad about his fate, in some inexplicable way. I felt like he wanted to be a man, or maybe he once was, but no longer. So if he was a werewolf, he was the kind that changes once, and then can never be human again. He seemed a tragic figure to me. He radiated sorrow, but I don't know why. So if you look out my back window in the kitchen, you'll see a dirt path that goes into those woods back there. That's the path I met the two of them on. And it was really something that upset my life for a number of years. It brought daily fear back into my day-to-day existence, which is what I had moved out of the city to get away from. And it was all because of what I still think was probably just a random encounter in the woods. I had been walking that path since I had moved in, only a little while earlier. It cheered me up after a hard day at my competitive job, but not on that evening. I was surprised to meet an old woman, dressed like a character from an old Universal monster picture, like a villager. She might have been Eastern European or possibly Romani, as she looked like a fortune teller from an old black and white movie. Walking next to her was what I at first took to be a bear, walking upright on its hind legs, as some of them are trained to do. Both of them were holding some kind of weird lanterns in their hands, I kid you not. I had never seen a bear except at a zoo, and I thought it was neat that the lady had taught him to pick things up, using his paws as hands. I have since learned that bears do not have thumbs, but I didn't remember that, in the presence of these two. Now, seeing a bear in the woods behind my house is not something I ever thought I would experience, let alone a trained circus bear. But there it was, and it was huge. I had no idea they could get that much bigger than a man, and I was so stunned that I just stared at that bear's face in awe. Once I locked onto his eyes, though, my entire world shifted and changed in a way that I still don't understand to this day. The old woman was talking English with a thick accent, sounding kind of like that woman that Trump is married to, if you've ever heard her speak. This lady was a lot older, though, and her voice sounded like she'd been smoking tobacco and screaming a lot for 6 or 7 decades. So maybe she had. I was holding onto a tree now because I was feeling dizzy, and like the world was turning to jello all around me. The only solid thing was the face of that bear, so I couldn't look away from it. I feared that I might pass out or pass on if I didn't keep staring into those eyes. I was missing a lot of what the woman was jabbering on and on and on about, but I noticed that she kept calling the bear a pooch, or her good little doggy, and I began to realize that he was not, in fact, a bear at all. He was just an immense and burly kind of a canine. I wouldn't call him fat, but he was hugely muscular. His fur was quite thick-looking, and I do believe there might have been a layer of fat to tide him over through the cold Transylvanian winters. But this was Pennsylvania, not Transylvania. So I wanted to question what was happening. Instead, I heard a voice in my head, telling me to be quiet and to listen to the old lady. I did, and she was telling me things that she and the huge intelligent wolfman needed. Supplies, and what frequency she needed them at. Some were weekly supplies, others were daily. Some were medical, some were food. I would buy them all for her and the huge Dogman. Some weeks I would eat oatmeal 3 times a day so that I could afford her expenses in my budget. But I had no ability to question the old woman when she told me her needs. And then came the day when she met me with the sad news that her pooch had passed on. She told me that she'd be moving away, and she wouldn't need my help in keeping the old dog alive any longer. The old lady thanked me for the first time in 3 years, and she told me that if I went to bed that night, imagining the life I would most like to live, she'd see to it that I was granted my wish as thanks for being kind to the old Dogman. I tried not to chuckle at her offer of magically making my life perfect, and I thanked the old woman, excited to be finally relieved of the intense financial burden she had placed me under for 37 or 38 months. I tried to keep a sad face on because of the woman's loss, but I wanted to kick up my heels and dance an Irish jig on that day. I wanted to celebrate, but I finally realized I had alienated all my friends, not having the money to hang out in town with any of them for 3 years. I had no social life and no chance at any kind of a lover, since I never went out, and I spent all my money keeping a Dogman alive in the woods. So I went to sleep that night, thinking about what kind of a life I actually would want to have if I had a choice in the matter. It did take a few years, but I mostly have my list fulfilled these days, including the return of my social life and a boyfriend who might move in here if I don't move back into town where he lives. Plus, I got to meet my wonderful cousin, who is the only reason I'm writing this all down in the first place. And that is my weird Dogman experience. Thanks, cuz. So I'll cut it off there. And obviously, I have a number more to send you, as this is just the tip of the iceberg of those interviews, which were mostly done before 2016, although not entirely. I'd be happy to send more if you or your audience are interested. Our executive producer, S.A. Rose, is a PayPal member for years in a row. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, S.A. Rose, for making this episode possible. S.A. joined our PayPal club at peterbernard.com and gets to see our weekly secret uncensored Dogman stories. And so can you, if you listen to what this next guy has to say. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.